We said last week that talking about what is God like really, who is God really, is a subject that should occupy our lives, and yet we could never fully reach the end of it. We're talking about some of the attributes of God. We said last week that if you were an ant, if you could picture being an ant, and the scientist picks you up, puts you on a slide, slides you on the microscope, the scientist is studying the ant, but if the ant were to say to himself, what is the scientist really like? You would understand that the ant is at a tremendous disadvantage because he functions on a completely different level to the scientist. And we are at a far greater disadvantage because God is so much bigger than even the best human mind, and we're far smaller than ants by comparison. We're going to speak a little more about that today. Thankfully, God wants us to get to know Him better. And so He gives us His Word. He gives us His Holy Spirit to help us understand Him a little more. But to understand God is to start off with this knowledge, is that we will never truly understand Him. Does that make sense? That kind of paradox, that truth and tension. Just by the way, a couple of years back, I asked a friend of mine, Nigel Day-Lewis, who had written a number of theological books or courses for the correspondence college that NCMI used to have. I asked him what was the top 3 books that he would recommend. 2 of the books that he had ever read in his life, and he's a well-read man, and 2 of the books that he recommended were these 2 that speak about what God is like. This book, Knowing God, by J.I. Packer. If you can get your hands on one of these, if you're a Kindle reader, both of these are available on Kindle as well through Amazon. But both of these very, very challenging books talking about the need we have to, the design we have to know God and the difficulty we have in getting to know Him. Both of these books speak on some of the attributes of God. This one is by A.W. Tozer. It's called The Knowledge of the Holy. A number of other books that have been written on these subjects, but these 2, if you can get your hands on them, allow yourself to be stirred even more than you can, then we can get round to in these few minutes we have together on a Sunday. 2 Corinthians 3:18, this is just by way of introduction, says this, "And we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit." By talking about God, thinking about God, trying to understand God, following Him, getting to know Him, we're doing the first bit, which says we're contemplating the Lord's glory. We're trying to figure out what you are like, God of the universe. And this verse has got a tremendous promise for any human being that embarks on that kind of journey. It says, as we behold or contemplate, some Bibles say reflect, some versions say reflect the Lord's glory, something happens to the person doing that. Paul says here, we will be transformed. In other words, the act of trying to understand God, of following Him, transforms us. And then it says, with ever-increasing glory. So we're on this constant journey of becoming more like Him, knowing that we never fully will be like Him because He's God and we are creature. We are human. And yet God, who is the Lord, the Spirit, as this verse says, is transforming us as we look at Him and as we, if you like, study Him, try to understand what He is like. Last week we looked at the subject of God being all-powerful, God being omnipotent. Just out of interest, how many people were able to join us last week? Great, well done for coming back again. This week we're looking at 2 attributes of God that sit very closely together, and yet they create a tension. They're also 2 quite big words, but CityHill isn't scared off by 2 big words, are you? As long as they're on the screen, you can copy them, write them down. That's the main thing. And these words, these attributes of God that we're looking at this morning are transcendent and immanent. God is transcendent and God is immanent. Immanent with an A in the middle. And this is a word you probably will only find in theology kind of books like this. God is immanent. Transcendent means that God exists outside of space and time. We're going to take each of these, so this is just to show how they sit together. We're going to start with transcendent, then go on to immanent. But transcendent means God exists outside of all space and all time. The other word, immanent, means God is present and working within space and time. God is present and working within space and time. Incidentally, that second word is not to be confused with immanent with an I in the middle. If you are 8.5 months pregnant, the arrival of your baby is imminent. That's the second word. That's the one with the I. Something's about to happen. The other word is a theology type word. It's a God type word, is that God is present in space and time. Interestingly, over the centuries, different people have had different views of God and of creation, etc. And deism, which is a belief that God only exists outside of space and time. He's the watchmaker who wound up the clock and then just lets it go, and he doesn't get involved in anybody's lives. That's on the one wrong extreme. On the other wrong extreme is pantheism, which says that God is all that he's created. So if you add up the sum total of all the trees and all the flowers and all creation, all in the universe, God is one with all of that. He's not distinguished from all of that. He is that. And so if you cut down a tree, you're cutting down a part of God. So that's pantheism. God is present. It's taking these two ideas, but to an extreme, and leaving the other one out. The Bible, however, shows that God is transcendent and present and working. Another word for immanent is that God is personal. God is involved. He's present. Even though the words that came through a little bit earlier on the microphone is God is wanting to heal migraine headaches. That's personal. If you've got a migraine headache or you suffer from migraines, that's not just God out there, deism. It's God is also present. He's interested in my life. So why don't we tackle this first attribute of God, and how I've structured these is to try and explain them a little bit, and then to ask this question at the end of each attribute is, what does this mean to me? I said to Jackie last night, I feel really overwhelmed in preaching this because in some ways, no, in many ways, I don't understand what I'm talking about. Talking about God. And as I sat and prepared some of this week, I was so overwhelmed again at the bigness and the gap, if you like, between me and God. And that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. But the absolute shortage of any human words to be able to talk about this, we do our best with words, all of us, but we know that we are simply learners together trying to understand what we could never fully understand, and yet the journey of trying to understand transforms us. So I say these things with that as a disclaimer. Can I put that tussen hakkies? And Father, as we talk and look at your word today and try and understand you a little bit better, I ask that for every one of us, our hearts would be wide open to you doing on the inside far beyond what human words could explain of you. You've been talking to us, working with us through our earlier time of music and song. And I pray that you would continue to do that now as we look at your word. Amen. So God is transcendent. He is outside of space and time. Isaiah 55, verse 9, Isaiah quoting God says this, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Using a height comparison, saying as the heavens are higher than the earth, as space is far greater than our little globe, the planet, God's saying that's one example of how transcendent I am, how much higher my ways are than your ways and my thoughts than yours. Two chapters later in Isaiah, and this is from the ESV translation, Isaiah says this, he says, "For thus says the one, capital O, who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, whose name is, beg your pardon, holy. I dwell in the high and holy place." You see how those chapters, those verses are saying similar things? This is the one, Isaiah is kind of introducing the one who's about to speak. He says, "For thus says the one who inhabits eternity." In Psalms it says, "From everlasting to everlasting you are God." We have no way of comprehending eternal. So God, using our language, says, imagine the heavens, and high they are above the earth. That's how much greater I am than you. That's how transcendent I am. And by the way, I'm the one who inhabits eternity. Wow. In the Message translation of that same verse, it says this, a message from the high and towering God who lives in eternity, whose name is holy. I live in the high and holy places. Tozer puts it like this. He says, when we speak of God as transcendent, we mean, of course, that he is exalted far above the created universe, so far above that human thought cannot imagine it. So whatever you and I can imagine transcendent is, he's more than that. We're the ant, much smaller than, and he, of course, is God. Last week, in speaking about God's power, we spoke a little about the universe, and we mentioned that the speed of light was 300,000 kilometers per second. And then I spoke a little bit about the fact that the ruler measurement, I brought two props with me this morning. Thanks, Jax. Come back to that boyki in a moment. Yeah, stay. Thank you. The ruler measurement that physicists use to talk about the size of the universe is the ruler measurement of a light year. And we concluded, after we did some maths last week, that one light year, one ruler measurement, is 9.46, 9.5 trillion kilometers. So because of the spaces of the heavens are so vast, those who were here last week will remember we mentioned that a light year is the ruler measurement that scientists use to try and help us understand the vastness. So one ruler length is one light year, 9.5 trillion kilometers. We spoke last week about the Milky Way galaxy. And we spoke about it twirling around, and we live in there. Our solar system is in that Milky Way galaxy. And at the end of my little explanation, I said that to travel from one end of the Milky Way galaxy to the other is approximately 100,000 ruler lengths. 100,000 light years. Every light year being 9.5 trillion kilometers. But that's just the Milky Way galaxy. We spoke about all the stars involved, 100 billion at least odd stars in our galaxy. And then we spoke about the other galaxies, that there are as many galaxies in the universe, the visible universe, as there are stars in our galaxy. So I've just randomly put a slide together here, because we can't fathom the universe. I just called it the visible universe, and I put circles down. And this is about the full extent of my artistic display. So the scientists guesstimate that the visible universe, which they believe is expanding, if you were to take the same ruler length of a light year and measure it out across the universe, it's about 14 billion light years across. That is 14,000 million ruler lengths. And remember what this ruler represents? Just about 10 trillion kilometers. times by 14,000 million. And there's just galaxies and stars in this universe, okay? Now, I understand that I don't understand, nor do you understand, those big numbers. But a little while back, I posed the question to Google of how many stars do they believe are in the visible universe. So if you add up all the galaxies, all the stars, and they guesstimate that there are about 70 sextillion. I didn't know a number like that existed, but it's 70,000 million. That's a 7 with 22 zeros behind it. The estimate, broad estimate of the number of stars in the universe. And the guy that was writing the article kindly explained to me that if you were to, they had done some maths, and if you were to go to every beach on the universe, they'd taken all the coastlines of the entire world, did some maths equations on how much sand there would be on so many meters of beach. They said if you went onto every beach in the world and counted every grain of sand, I mean, we live pretty close, so you could start with the Durban beachfront and count, I mean, we're talking every grain representing a star, right? Every grain of sand on all the beaches of the entire world. There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the beaches on planet Earth. Pop. Okay, so let's say that we could take all of that space, 14 billion light years, the visible universe, we don't know what's beyond that. And let's say that we could represent all of that with this miniature basketball. That inside this basketball, in this space, was 70,000 million stars. But let's say that we could do something more incredible than that, and all of human time that's ever been existed as a little timeline inside the ball. Okay? Okay? I'd appreciate some feedback on this maths point. And that could be out of insecurity, or it could be because these are such vast things we're talking about. So let's say that represented the entire visible universe. And let's say that this building, just for the sake of keeping it in sight, let's say that this building represented eternity. God says, I'm the high and lofty one who dwells in eternity, whose name is Holy with a capital H. In other words, he is transcendent. He lives outside of space and time. To look at this from another angle, Ephesians 1, New Testament, says it like this. God, he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above. So to help us understand, here's another bit of spatial analogy. Far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. So transcendence, according to that verse, is more than just space and time. Let's say that thrown into this little basketball, we could add every power that's ever existed, every bit of energy. Let's say that we could add every human power, every human authority, the mightiest emperors and the mightiest kings and all of the millions of people's deaths that they commanded, all inside here. And let's say that we could add inside here every angelic power. All the angels that the Bible say do God's bidding, his messengers. Let's say that we could add every demonic power in here, all of those things listed in Ephesians 1, the devil himself, all of his minions, every dark power. That verse says that if you put all of that together inside here, this is my analogy now, is that God is far above all of that. He exists, He's transcendent, He dwells outside of space and time. How do you, from God's point of view, explain that to creature like us, except to say far above? Can you see how important this is? Is that if we view that it's like God on this side, and on this side the devil, and all the bad people in the world, I'm oversimplifying things, and like I'm following God as, okay, I'm this side to give His kingdom great support because shucks, shame. God's really under a lot of pressure, in our world, and culture doesn't like Him, and they use His name in a bad way in movies and on TV. People blaspheme, and need to just fight for God's side. And boy, the devil's really powerful. I mean, it's just, see what he's doing in the world. And right from the time of the tree and the Garden of Eden and the snake and all that stuff, and it's just havoc. Things are bad in this world. At least we can keep our spirits up because we're with God, and God can be happy that He's got me. Isn't this how many of us talk about and think about things? And bad days, read the paper and read the news. Oh, look at what the devil's got right again and all the bad people. Oh, okay. Well, Father, our Father in heaven, our Father in heaven, not just in the skies. Oh, the high and holy one who inhabits eternity. Hallowed be your name. This isn't just a fight between God, who's kind of equally, just a little bit stronger than the devil, who ultimately in a cosmic arm wrestle is just going to make it. No, this is the high and holy one who inhabits eternity. And this is far too big to compare to what the entire universe, all power, all authority looks like by comparison to Him. Sure, He set it all into spin, He set it all into motion, but He's God. He does what He wants. In Psalms it says He does whatever He pleases. He's transcendent. He doesn't answer to any of us. Just because I feel bad about what God did or have got major questions about, I don't get to point a finger at God in any meaningful way. He's transcendent. Just God. He's transcendent in that way, but not just in terms of height and space and authority, but in the quality of His being. He is completely transcendent. Let's say that you were to take a caterpillar and compare the quality of that caterpillar's being, the essence of its soul, to the mightiest archangel. Think of the incredible gulf that exists between the caterpillar and the archangel in terms of just about everything. And yet, God is as transcendent to the caterpillar as He is transcendent to the archangel and all humans. If you could put every being and the quality of every being ever made, the archangel, all caterpillars, all humans, all everything, we're way down here in the little basketball. And the transcendent, perfect God, Ephesians says, fills everything and in every way. He's not just like the best human being and a little bit better. He is God. He is Spirit with a capital S. He is infinite. He is eternal. He is Creator. And everything else is creature, is finite, is small, is limited, is mortal, etc., etc. God is majestically unique, utterly splendid, incomprehensible. Or in our word today, He is transcendent, So what does this mean to us? The fact that we figured out we couldn't understand him, that he is so transcendent, so outside of space and time. It should mean many things, but one for this morning is we then should be a people who fear God reverently and with awe. What's really interesting to me is if you go through the Bible and look at creatures who interact with this transcendent God, I'm speaking about some of the great heroes of the faith. You have a guy like Moses who approaches, in essence, a visible representation of transcendent God, the burning bush. He gets there, Moses, and the voice comes from the bush, you take off your sandals, the place where you are standing is holy ground. Moses realizes, whoa, I'm interacting with the transcendent God. The entire nation of Israel at Mount Sinai, God, the transcendent God, comes in with thunder and lightning and smoke. The entire nation tremble. And so to Moses, we are not going anywhere near that mountain. That's scary. Isaiah preached on this last term when he sees this picture of God in the temple, this vision. His immediate reaction is, woe to me, I'm ruined. For I'm a man of unclean lips. Consistently throughout the Bible, when human beings realize transcendent God, the holy, awesome, powerful God, their consistent response is one of awe. The Bible calls it the fear of God, where regularly people said, please, we are going to die. And they weren't trying to be melodramatic. It's God. Peter, in Luke chapter 5, verse 8, when they had this miraculous catch of fish with Jesus there with them, it says he fell. When he saw this, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man. John, who refers to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved, after the ascension, has this vision of the glorified Christ in Revelation 1. It's a magnificent chapter. It says, I saw there standing before me one who was like a son of man, and he talks about him being dressed in this robe and this golden sash. It says his voice was like the voice of rushing waters. Out of his mouth came a double-edged sword, and it's this incredible picture that Jesus gives him of glorified Christ. And you know, John in his gospel said about himself that he put his head on Jesus' chest. Do you know what it says about him in the vision in Revelation 1? He just says, I fell at his feet as though dead. This is an appropriate response for a creature to a transcendent God. Hebrews 12 puts it like this. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, because our king is unshakable, is that ... let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. The second part of this message is about God being personal. But I'd like to suggest that in so many of our lives, God being personal has become the revelation. And so the idea of a transcendent God diminishes because it's so far out of our understanding and our comprehension. It's like, well, transcendence out there, God is with me. That puts us in an awful lot of danger. Because if we start with the idea that he is transcendent and all-powerful and holy, and that grips us. You see, none of these guys had to be told, okay, John, now an appropriate response would be to lie down on your face. Okay, I'll do that. And now what you should do is just say, I feel like you're going to kill me. I feel like I'm dead. Great God, I'm in awe of you. This is by revelation, the idea that God is God. And and that everything else, including me, is creature. And an appropriate response to that kind of God is to worship acceptably with reverence and awe, according to Hebrews 12. As well as that, God gives us this incredible revelation, which is all the more spectacular because of all that I've just said, is that God is present and working within space and time. He's in our world. He's in our universe. He's with me. In other words, He is personal. Remember the verse I read in Isaiah 57 earlier? It said, "For thus is the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place." I think I've got it up there somewhere. I'm carrying down on through those notes. The very next line after that says this, "And also with him who is of contrite and lowly spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite." Oh, can you see transcendent and immanent, the one with the A, all in one verse? And this is throughout our Father in heaven, transcendent and personal, who inhabits eternity, transcendent. I dwell in the high and holy place. I'm bigger than any tiny, midgety little basketball of the universe, or whatever picture you choose to use. This is what I want you to know. Is not only do I dwell in the high and holy place, but also with those who are contrite, have contrite and lowly spirit. That doesn't mean people who beat up on themselves the whole time. That means people who realize that without God, they sunk. That makes us contrite. That makes us lowly spirited. Blessed are the meek, Jesus said in the Beatitude. So God says, I inhabit eternity and I'm with you. My name is holy. And I want to interact with your world, Steve. With whatever your name is. They go so closely together. In Deuteronomy 1 verse 31, the transcendent God puts it like this. "There you saw how the Lord your God carried you, as a father carries his son, all the way you went until you reached this place." That was the nation of Israel. He says, he uses the most intimate parenting picture. I remember when Levi was, how old was he, Jackson, when he had his tonsils out? 5, 6, round about there. And we went to the hospital and checked him in, and off he went and had his tonsils out, and I just needed to nip out to do something. I can't remember what. And when I came back, he had come out of theater a bit early, and as I walked down the hallway to their pediatric ward, I could hear the most hectic screaming. And I just knew that's my boy. But not in the sense like okay, there was pandemonium. Jax was in there, she was in tears. There were 2 nurses trying to hold him down and trying to get him to take painkiller medication. He was screaming. Absolutely irrational from the after effects of this anesthetic. And he was just, he wasn't doing so well. This is my son, our son. And somehow the thing that calmed him down was for me to pick him up and carry him, head on my shoulder. And I walked up and down because he'd made such a noise. Shame, every other kid in that pediatric ward was terrified for their lives at whatever they were going to do to them in the theater. All the other moms, that look with moms of big eyes, thankful they're not you. But also, please keep him quiet because he's scaring my little guy. And I walked up and down with him in the corridor. And from his post-op, there was just blood on my shirt. And I didn't care. Because as I held him, he settled down. And eventually the nurses were able to walk with him. But for about half an hour, up and down in the ward, "It's going to be okay, my boy." Tears in my eyes. I'm with you. I can't swap places, but I wish that I could somehow. That for those that are parents, just that, man, don't like seeing my kid like this. That's the kind of picture the transcendent God uses about our lives. And he says, look how I carried you. And I look back on some of the areas of my life, and at various ages, I was the 4-year-old kicking and screaming and, where are you, God? Leave me alone. To anybody that tried to help. And God says, you will see in retrospect that I had you in my arms. And they're not just little human-shaped arms. They are transcendent arms. God is so personal. When the angel came in Matthew 1, said this, and they will call him, Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, which means God with us. The fact of Jesus Christ becoming a human being is known as the incarnation. He took on human flesh. That's what incarnation means. Can you think of how extraordinary that idea would have been to the angels when they were first told about it before humans knew? So Gabriel gets this message. I'm just using my imagination here. All the other angels who also creature along with us are saying, okay, so transcendent God is going to take on human form. How would that work? And there's an air of mystery to all of this. But the angel is given this message. They will call him Emmanuel, God with us. God with us. The fact of Jesus Christ walking on this earth is a great megaphone that the transcendent God uses to get our attention. Say, hey, you in the little red basketball, whatever your name is, hey, Steve, I love you. The transcendent God says you can also call him God with us. You know, between deism and pantheism, I would lean that way. Deism. That if you were powerful enough to create all of this and they were so stupid enough to mess it all up, I'm just like, okay, you're on your own. Just roll it forward. And yet the Bible says that God doesn't just do that. He climbs into the little pale blue dot, the little planet called Earth, comes into our world, and down through the ages, he stands on our timeline, and he reaches an arm out this way, and he reaches an arm out that way, and he says, I love you enough to take all the punishment you deserve, creature, onto myself, the creator, the transcendent God. And when you talk about that story, you can reference it as God with us. That was the time when God came here and walked in our shoes. I don't believe that we can fully appreciate God with us if we don't first understand God's not like us. In closing, to ask, what does this mean to us? I would like to put up on the screen 10 verses. There's in 2 verse bits of Psalm 139. This is how David interacted with the omnipresent, transcendent God. And if it will help you, please feel free to close your eyes. But if it will help you more, then please feel free to look at the verses on the screen. But that this could be the prayer of ours to God, the transcendent God who is God with me. He says, you have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. Sometimes imagine that's David saying, I often speak without thinking, but God, you already know what I'm going to say before I've thought it through. He says, you hem me in, behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty for me to attain. I'll never understand that. Where can I go from your spirit? Where could I flee from your presence? He uses some hypotheticals. He says, if I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Every single one of us needs to know that, not just here, but here, about this amazing God. Is that not only does He hold all of space and time, all matter and all authority is far below Him, but David says in Psalm 139, His right hand will hold me fast. He walks up to the Ivers, whatever your name is. And it's not just, hey, I've got you by the front of the shirt and I'm going to pull you forward, but through the most difficult times, through that time, Ivor, when you stopped going to church and you were doing your own thing and Debbie was praying for you, and even there, His right hand held me fast. No matter how lonely any of us ever feel, He says, I could never be away from you, God, because you are everywhere. My thoughts, before I've thought them, you know them. My actions, before I do them, you've spotted them. My words, before I've spoken, you've got it. Your right hand, your right hand, your right hand will hold me fast. Could we stand together, please?